Right, I put up a Facebook status earlier saying that I was going to do a any questions answered video. So quite a few people sent in various questions of various topics they wanted to hear me discuss briefly. I got a load of them in, so I'm going to not spend too long on each one and hopefully rattle through them. Keenan says he wants to hear me discuss Ike Ibeabuchi, if anything, just to hear you say his name. So I'll say it again, Ike Ibeabuchi. Hope I've pronounced that correctly. He, I know, has been arrested again for some sort of different felony or criminality or something like that. I don't know what the state of play is, but to be honest, the guy, his chance of a comeback seems to be fading away massively. The rumours were that he was going to fight Andy Ruiz Jr. on the Pacquiao undercard. Clearly that didn't happen. Now he's back in legal problems, so you'd have to say he is looking less and less likely to make a return to boxing. And if you want to put your hopes behind a mid-40s heavyweight of days gone by, perhaps Mr. Briggs is your man these days. Tom says, do you think Hughie has more skill and looks a more exciting fighter than Tyson? Also, who wins if they were to fight? Clearly they won't. Does Hughie Fury have more skill? Not necessarily. Hughie does very, very good basics. You know, he's got exceptional fundamentals, good movement, good defence, good jab. I'd say there's an argument that he's more disciplined than Tyson. He doesn't blow up so much between fights. He keeps the defence tight. He doesn't showboat in the ring. He's perhaps less flamboyant, and that possibly creates a tighter defensive fighter on the whole. Is he more exciting? For me, probably not. A lot of the excitement with Tyson Fury comes to the, comes from the sort of uncertainty around him with his sort of crazy persona and the fact that he's liable to put his hands behind his back when he's fighting Vladimir Klitschko. Is he better than Tyson Fury? Again, probably not based on what I've seen so far. Tyson's obviously proven at a much, much, much higher level. Hughie also seems to be a guy who predominantly boxes from the outside. That's his basic. And obviously Tyson's quite a bit bigger than him. So if they were to fight, I'd side with Tyson based on experience, based on size. And also I'm seeing a bit more variation from Tyson. You know, he can do orthodox, he can do southpaw. He's adept on the inside and on the outside. At this point, I think Tyson's the superior fighter. Hughie can certainly get there. He's only a baby in heavyweight terms. Jay says, if in this crazy world Triple G and Eubank Jr. fought now, how would it play out? He also wants to hear about Hughie and AJ. Triple G versus Eubank Jr., I would side with Triple G in mid-round stoppage. Eubank Jr. is big, strong, tough. He appears to have a decent chin. He's just very defensively open. And I think a guy like Triple G would be able to outbox him in the same sense Billy Joe Saunders did in their early rounds. But I also think he'd have the power to be able to hurt him. You know, Eubank Jr. appears to have a good chin, but I've seen him wobbled by Spike O'Sullivan. I've seen him wobbled by Nick Blackwell at one point in their fight when Nick Blackwell caught him unawares. Triple G is the best in the world in his division at present. He is a different level to Eubank Jr. in terms of boxing skill and in terms of punch power. So I'd be inclined to sign with Triple G. As for Hughie versus Anthony Joshua, based on their most recent performances, I'd make Anthony Joshua a substantial favourite, maybe 70-30, 80-20. Joshua's, again, the bigger guy, the stronger guy, possibly the more natural athlete, certainly the harder puncher. Hughie Fury, he may have the edge in sort of technical ability. He's probably the best amateur-style boxer out of the two. His best bet would be to move, to jab, to try and get through the early rounds, survive the earlier Joshua onslaught, and then box his ears off in the middle rounds and try and drown him late and, you know, steal a points victory or go for a late stoppage. You know, you wouldn't rule Hughie out of the fight. I'm not saying it's not a possibility Hughie could be effective. I'd certainly say Joshua's a favourite in that fight. John Joe says, how long till Hay pulls out of a fight due to injury? Lol. Is Hay going to pull out of a fight due to injury? I mean, Paul makes this point under your comment, John Joe, but you know, realistically, you've got to wonder, if Hay pulls out of a fight, it's pretty much his career over. He needs the momentum, he needs the hype, and he's not got too many miles left on the clock. So I don't see him pulling out of too many fights, if I'm honest, at this stage. John Joe, Groves versus Callum Smith, how would it play out? Callum Smith's impressed me. He's looked very, very good recently. But I also think George Groves under McGuigan has looked very decent. I think everything's working off his jab, and I think George Groves looks to be an improved fighter from Paddy Fitzpatrick to say McGuigan. At this point, on the balance of probabilities, I'd pick George Groves to win. Callum Smith, he's got everything offensively. I'm worried about him defensively. I'm worried that he's a bit upright. I'm worried that he's got no head movement. I'm worried that he's a tiny bit stiff. And we've seen him hit hard in fights by Rocky Fielding. We even saw him caught by David Brophy. Sorry, not by David Brophy, by... I forget the guy's name now. But yeah, Callum Smith, basically, he hasn't fought at the level of George Groves. I'm not convinced about him defensively. And I think George Groves would be a big, big step up. And I think with George Groves' movement, explosiveness and jab, he could potentially cause some real problems for Callum Smith. And I'd lean to George Groves at this stage. Tough fight though. Curtis says Selby versus Frampton result in that potential fight. I actually discussed this at great length with my good friend Ultratech Sports last night. And we both agreed that Lee Selby would win that fight. Frampton hasn't impressed me in his last two fights, to be honest. And I think stepping up in weight against this guy as slick and as skilled as Lee Selby, I'd side to Lee Selby. You know, Frampton wouldn't be out of the fight, but Frampton would need to step up a level for me. James says Stewie Hall fights this Saturday. He certainly does. Tom says, what are your thoughts on the team up with Frank Warren, Ricky Hatton and Nassim Hamed? Yeah, it's decent. You know, I guess Hatton and Nassim Hamed both have prospects that they've signed on the management contracts, and it's good that these guys can get exposure via Frank Warren's, Box Nation and that side of things. I'm not overly interested in it, just based on the fact that none of their prospects have at this stage caught my eye as new world beaters, however, and I guess that would make it more exciting. Alex Cox says, women's boxing, good or bad, should it be included on big UK cards? I know it's a controversial subject. My personal opinion is I don't have a huge interest in watching it. I don't like seeing women getting punched in the face. It's not something that I personally would enjoy. You know, good luck to any women who box. You know, it's fantastic. They've got a huge amount of skill. If anyone enjoys boxing, they should be able to box. In terms of a spectator sport, for me, it's something I'd find uncomfortable and wouldn't overly enjoy. So, from my perspective, probably not. But I've got nothing against women in boxing, if they want to box. Steve says, Brook versus Bradley, what's your opinion? Is there a good chance of getting Bradley over after his loss? Yeah, there potentially is. And Bradley was slightly disappointing for me in the fight. I've always thought Bradley was a very, very underrated fighter and a tough fight for anyone out there. I think momentum's key in boxing. Brook is looking more and more devastating with each passing fight. Tim Bradley's had a lot of wars in his career. He's getting old. Maybe not old in terms of years, but old in terms of miles on the clock. And with Brook's jab, with Brook's athleticism, I think he would have the potential to cause Bradley real problems, and I'd make Brook a favourite in that fight. Bradley was quite hittable against Pacquiao, and Brook carries real power. So, we've seen Tim Bradley start to get hurt in fights. Maybe his famed punch resistance is finally starting to fade. Perhaps Brook could hurt him in the fight. That's my opinion anyway. Daniel says, Prince Nassim versus Mayweather, who would win if in the same weight? For me, Mayweather, comfortably. Clear margin. Nassim Hamed, huge personality, big showman, exciting character. Not in the same league as a Floyd Mayweather. Nowhere near as complete. Jacob says, the potential of a Tony Bellew versus Joe Gallagher partnership. I couldn't think of anything worse. Joe Gallagher, not a good defensive trainer for my mind. Fighters routinely have upright stances, limited head movement. If you look at his guys, Cardle, Smith, Smith, Quigg, these guys aren't defensive wizards. Tony Bellew, one of the most inept defensive fighters you'll see. The combination, for me, not be attractive. Rubens says, have you recovered from John Smith? He's referring to the now famous incident in my live show the other night. If you want to check that out, scroll through to 2 hours and 2 minutes into the live show. Have I recovered from John Smith? I'm recovering, but I double lock the doors each night. I make sure the chain is on, and I make sure my baseball bat is underneath my bed ribbon. Finn says, do you see the UK becoming a mecca of boxing, since there is an obvious decline in the States and the opposite is happening in the UK? Absolutely. You know, we got more world champions than them. We sell more tickets than them. It's actually getting to the point where we may even sell more pay-per-views than them, especially now Mayweather's retired. UK, huge boxing scene, and Simon Briggs relocating over here, chasing out big fights over here, shows what a big market it is. You know, Dillian White versus Anthony Joshua. The pay those got, the pay-per-views those guys sold for a British title fight highlights the point again. Couldn't agree more. Josh Norton says, what do you want to see from Parker against Takam to bring him up to top 10 contender level? The answer to that is very simple. It's a win. Takam's a solid fighter. Takam is definitely on the periphery of the top 10. I can't remember exactly where I've ranked him, but between 8 and 12. If Parker beats him, he goes into my top 10. I'd like to see Parker be tight defensively, keep discipline. If he does that, I'll be super impressed, and he could even go up to number 7 or 8 in my rankings. I'll do another video on heavyweight rankings after that weekend, because there's some big boxing weekends to come. Thomas messaged me. He goes, how are boxing purses usually divided? Do fighters get a set purse, or is it based solely on tickets or pay-per-view sold? I'd say 99 times out of 100 it is a set purse, and they will also get a commission on ticket sales. So for example, an agreed fee plus 10% of all ticket sales. Usually it's about 10% in my understanding. In terms of splits and pay-per-view splits, that's only for the top level fighters. You know, I think like the guys like Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury will be getting pay-per-view splits. You know, the big fights like Frampton will be on splits, but 99 fights out of 100, no, it's going to be a set fee. That's just for the mega fights. He also says, what's my reaction to the recent Fury press conference? You know, bizarre, entertaining, enthralling. Does he get the credit he deserves? No. Could he have done more to give himself a positive public image? Yes. Is it entertaining? Certainly. I'm glued. I'm absolutely glued. Final question, which has actually come through on message from Dave. What's your opinion of the true heavyweight championship? Are you a strictly lineal title guy, or do you believe in the public consensus system now there are numerous world titles? Yeah, I believe in public consensus. You know, you can't tell me that Canelo is the #1 middleweight, because he beat Miguel Cotto, who beat Sergio Martinez, or here's the lineal title, or here's the WBC belt. For me, I'm a consensus guy. You know, I'm absolutely a consensus guy. It so happens in the heavyweight division that the lineal champion, Tyson Fury, is also the consensus #1 heavyweight. But for me, with all the belts in boxing, with all the politics, with all the fact that some fights can and can't be made, I think the only way to judge a true champion is by public consensus at the minute. And in terms of the heavyweight division, if you take the casuals out of it who think that Anthony Joshua is the one true god, I think at least 90% of people would say Tyson Fury is the consensus #1 heavyweight on the planet. Guys, I'm out. Thanks very much to everyone who sent in questions. I hope I've got to everyone. I hope I've answered your question. If you've enjoyed this, do hit the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please press subscribe.